Have you ever wondered why people like politicians who have never taught a day in their life are so opinionated about education and education policy, or just, teaching in general? There's a concept coined by somebody named Lordy back in the 70s, who's like an educational scholar, known as the apprenticeship of observation that explains what's happening. Basically, the apprenticeship of observation is the idea that opinions around education or teaching grow out of thousands of hours of observing teachers from a student perspective. So for example, if you go from school from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, that's 13 years of observing people teach. And if you go into higher education, that's even more time spent observing somebody, typically 5 days a week in a subject area. That's very different than like another profession, like a lawyer. How often do people who go into law actually sit down and observe lawyers do what they do on a daily basis? Now, the thing is, because there's so much exposure to education or teaching and what people think it looks like, people get these ideas in their head of, hey, this thing worked really well for me, then it must work really well for other people. Everybody must be experiencing similar or the same things. You have this like very narrow scope of what education looks like from your perspective. But what's missing are some important key details, like why are teachers doing something a certain way? What about the internal monitoring and adjusting based on how students are responding and progressing through their learning? But it also gives a very incomplete understanding of like the different struggles that teachers deal with on a day-to-day basis. For example, as a student, you likely don't see all the difficult conversations with parents, how degrading professional development can be to teachers. How many times have I been treated like a child or like I didn't know something when I've literally written chapters on a topic that I was forced to attend? Or just, how much of waste of a time meetings can be, or how much work educators do on weeknights, weekends, and like so-called breaks and whatnot. Or how some teachers are forced to do what's best for a class average on a test rather than what they know what is best for each student. Or how many jobs educators have outside of teaching because it doesn't pay enough, etc. This idea of the apprenticeship of observation is kind of like if you watch me like play the drums for several hours a day for a decade and then thinking that you've developed an understanding of how to drum without ever picking up a pair of sticks, or even understood what I was doing and why I was doing that, as opposed to something else when practicing. This false sense of confidence and understanding of something, when you're missing so many key details and whatnot, can have some profound impacts on conversations with parents, or admin, or people who create educational policy who have never taught, or even in professional development, teacher education, and curriculum development. So we're going to kind of unpack each of these in this episode. This excerpt of the CSK8 podcast is from episode number 202, which is titled The Apprenticeship of Observation and Computer Science Education.